So yeah, so what we are going to do is we are going to start with heart rate variability. In the first session, what we saw was just uh, the variation of the heart rate between one window to another window. We'll now look into the heart rate variability as a whole. So we have this capillary signal. We have this capillary signal, which is the pulse, and the x-axis is obviously time. For 120 seconds, we have this. So x-axis is time, and the y-axis is obviously amplitude. So y-axis is amplitude. Now, what we do is we find out the maxima, which is known as the peak. So this is one maxima, 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 and so and so. So these are known as the peaks. So this maxima where the peak is appearing in the pulse, we calculate the time duration from the start to this peak. This is known as the so this is a peak, and this is the interval. So let's call this interval as from here to here another interval, from here to here another interval, from here to here another interval, and so on and so forth. So let us call these intervals as I1, I2, I3, I4, I1, I2, I3, I4, and so and so. And these intervals are obviously in terms of time. And we know that in 120 seconds or 12,000 1,20,000 milliseconds, we are capturing about 3,600 samples, and in every 33 milliseconds we have a signal value. So each of the signal value in terms of sampling rate, they are appearing after every 33 milliseconds. So the samples are equally spaced, which are appearing after every 33 milliseconds. So when we talk about Lyfas, the minimum sample time is 33 milliseconds. Whereas some of the consumer grade ECGs, their sample time is 100 hertz. So Lyfas captures at 30 hertz. Some of the commercial ECGs are 100 hertz. So in every 10 milliseconds, you have a sample. Some of the gold standard ECGs, they are 10,000 hertz. So in every 1 millisecond, you have a sample. So the higher the sampling rate is, you'd get a more accurate signal. And therefore, there is a lot of signal processing that has to be done in Lyfas to figure out what is the next set of signals, because there is obviously 33 millisecond difference between two samples. So there is a lot of data processing that happens to complete this signal. So I1 is in millisecond, I2 is in millisecond, I3 is in millisecond. Let's say that somebody's bits per minute, somebody's heart rate is 60 bits per minute. That is, in 1 second, one peak is appearing. So, which means that one peak per second. In 60 seconds, totally 60 peak is appearing. Now, in 1 second, there are totally 30 samples. So one peak per second, and this is continuous. So let's say that this peak is appearing. This peak is appearing at certain interval. Let's say 100 milliseconds. This peak is appearing after 160, after another 160 milliseconds, and so and so. So what we do is we calculate the time difference between these two peaks. So we take the time difference between the two peaks, one and peak two. We say this as interval I1, and similarly interval I2, and so on and so forth. So this is a time domain variable. These values are in millisecond. Now, if I1 is equal to I2 is equal to I3 is equal to I4, which means that the signal is very, very robust. The heartbeat is appearing absolutely at the same position. So say I1 appears after let's say 700 millisecond, I2 appears after 700 milliseconds, I3 appears after 700 milliseconds, I4 appears after 700 milliseconds. So uh, or I1 appears after 1000 milliseconds, because we are taking heartbeat as 60 BPM. Let's say I1, I2, I3, I4, all are well spaced. After every 1000 milliseconds, one peak is appearing. So now what happens is I1, I2, I3, I4, they have no time difference. They have no lag. So they're appearing just exactly at the same time. So technically speaking, if I1 is equal to I2, if I1 is equal to 1000, I2 is equal to 1000, I3 is equal to 1000, I4 is equal to 1000, then we say there is no variation in the heart rate. Heart rate is consistent. So we call this low heart rate variability. We call this condition as low heart rate variability, because heart rate is not changing consistently. After every 1000 milliseconds, one peak is appearing. So there is no variability in the heart rate. So when there is no variability in the heart rate, we say that the autonomic nervous system is not working fine, because the body is making changes every second. I'm talking, I'm breathing, you are not breathing continuously. So your breathing rate varies, the way that you process the data vary. So if I look into a green object, the way mind processes it will vary. If you observe blood, the way mind processes it will vary. So every second there is a change in the body. And if there is no change in the heart rate variability is nearly zero, then we say that there is an autonomic impairment. That is, the autonomic system is not responding well to the need of the body. That is the autonomic impairment. And autonomic impairment can be seen in the cases where the body is going down very fast. For example, when there is a cardiac stroke which is going on, where there is a cardiac stroke which is going on, or whether there is a cerebral stroke which is going on, the body is not in a position to respond to other needs of the body. There is no change. The autonomic system is not responding. So low heart rate variability means autonomic system not responding. Anytime we see low heart rate variability, the reasons for low heart rate variability are twofold. Number one, Number one reason is extreme amount of emotional depression. When you are depressed, you might have observed that your body feels very lazy. You don't want to do any work. You don't want to move out of the bed. You just want to get restricted into bed, think. So one of the first reasons of low heart rate variability is depression. When the mind goes into depression, the autonomic system stops responding. The second reason is an acute event. Second reason is an acute event. There might be stroke. There might be a liver failure. There might be a cytokinin storm, which body is handling in the case of cancer or in case of, let's say, COVID. There might be a complete occlusion in certain part of the body. There might be a complete kidney failure. So in those kind of acute events, we don't have any heart rate variability because the autonomic nervous system, that mode, if you remember, sensor switch, it is not changing. So switch is active, switch is not varying. So it means that whatever body is sending the signal, the autonomic system is not responding. So whenever we see the autonomic system is not responding, we have to understand that the body is going through either an acute event or a depression. The interesting thing to know is that any acute event in itself is a very depressing event. You don't think anything else. You are just lost in the thoughts, lost in the pain. So long period of depression might result in an acute event. An acute event will also result in clinical depression. So that is the reason when you have cancer, kind of patient goes through an extreme amount of depression. When you hear about COVID, a lot of people goes through a lot of depression because the autonomic nervous system stops responding to the body's need. So this is what low heart rate variability is. What is high heart rate variability? Now, let's say in the same example, we have something like I1 is equal to 1000 milliseconds. The I2 appears after 500 milliseconds. Then I3 appears after 1300 milliseconds. I4 appears after 1500 milliseconds. So the longer the distance is, which means that the peaks are arriving at a far away distance. So heart rate is coming down. And the smaller they are, the peaks are arriving quickly. So heart rate is higher. I5 is equal to, let's say, 300 milliseconds. So when 300 milliseconds is the bit interval, that means 3 peaks are appearing per second. Then in 60 seconds, 180 peaks will appear. So this is a condition of ventricular tachyarrhythmia. Heart rate goes, the resting heart rate goes up to 180, 190. This is a case of ventricular tachyarrhythmia. So if the interval is 300 milliseconds, that means after every 300 milliseconds, a peak is appearing. So in a second, 300, 300, 300, in a second, 3 peaks are appearing. So in 60 seconds, 180 peaks will appear, tachycardia. If the interval is very, very long, let's say 1500 milliseconds, then in this case, then in 3 seconds, 2 peaks will appear. So 1500 into 2 is 3. So in 3 seconds, 2 peaks will appear. Then in 60 seconds, 40 peaks will appear. This is again a condition of bradycardia. So this is a case where the heart rate is varying from a bradycardia to tachycardia. This is called a very high heart rate variability. This is a condition which is called a very high heart rate variability. This is called a very high heart rate variability. And what happens when the when the heart rate variability is very high, that is body is shifting from bradycardia to tachycardia, you know that the autonomic system is not capable of coming back to the equilibrium. It is trying very high. This is an extreme amount of autonomic stress. So the very high heart rate variability suggests that there is an extreme amount of autonomic stress. There is an extreme amount of autonomic stress, and the autonomic system is not capable of coming back to equilibrium or the homeostasis. Now, this is a condition that happens before any acute event. This happens before any acute event or in tremendous amount of anxiety. So low heart rate variability is observed when the event is going on, when the event has started, or there is a significantly uncontrollable clinical depression where you don't want to do anything, you are not feeling to do anything, you don't want to leave, you are somehow, the thoughts of suicide comes in, you feel low about yourself. That's when your heart rate variability goes down, your autonomic system gives up. I mean, it doesn't respond to the body. And when you are tremendously anxious, you are thinking about something, some thoughts is coming back, you are extremely anxious about the situation, you are afraid, you are fearful. So the autonomic system is trying to balance the body in a very sporadic way. It is trying out everything. It is trying out to increase the heart rate, bring down the heart rate. So it is trying extremely hard to balance the body. That's a condition when it happens generally when we have the anxiety and palpitation, restlessness. You are feeling restless. There is some fear, something in your mind which is so depressed, which is so anxiety of anxious that you are expecting something. This also happens when the initial cytokinin storm is started getting generated. So the body is sending the T cells to attack the cancerous cells, and they are killing kind of the normal healthy cells of the body. So there is an anxious situation in the body is not capable of handling that situation. So that is what causes the very high heart rate variability. So when we look into heart rate variability, it's a spectrum. If it is very low, we know that the event is already going on. If it is very high, we know there is an event which is upcoming. If it is very low, we know that if there is no other physiological marker of event, let's say that he is not having any chest pain, he is not having any dry mouth, or any kind of acidity, vomiting sensation. If there is no such physiological effect, then we consider low heart rate variability as a depression marker. When there is a high heart rate variability, we know that the event is going on. So we ask, what is the whether the mind is getting blank, whether there is a pain in the chest, whether there is a pain in the backside, and all the standard questions that are associated with history and history of stroke or other events. And if there are no such physiological marker, then we consider this to be an anxiety moment. And what we understand is depression may lead to the event, anxiety may trigger the event. So depression may lead to the event, anxiety may trigger the event. An event may lead to depression, and pre-event may make the patient anxious. So whenever you are under whenever you see somebody under anxiety and under depression, we have to consider that these are very closely markers for an acute event. I mean, there could be a cerebral stroke, cardiac stroke, or a specific organ failure. So this is what we have to understand. Now we'll go a little bit more, and I'll not bring in the mathematics, but I'll bring on the terminology of heart rate variability and try to explain you how to interpret heart rate variability markers. So before we do that, let me just write down the what we understood so far. Heart rate variability is a direct surrogate marker to read the autonomic nervous system. It is a spectrum, low heart rate variability to very high heart rate variability. So very low heart rate variability, very low HRV means two things: depression and event. Depression and event, and very high heart rate variability means anxiety and event trigger. Anxiety and event trigger. Now, how do we calculate the heart rate variability in itself? So we saw a very basic example of taking I1, I2, I3, I4 and comparing them. So heart rate variability comes with a little bit of more of the mathematics. It is not as simple as taking I1, I2, I3 and comparing, because heart rate gets varied due to a lot of other aspects, like for example finger movement, whatever your thought process is, whatever your body's need is. So we try to eliminate all this and come up with a very robust mathematics for heart rate variability. How that mathematics work is as follows. So that mathematics works is as follows. Heart rate variability, what it does is we have intervals I1, I2, I3, I4, I5, and so on and so. We take a mean of this first. And then we take a standard deviation of this. So when we take a standard deviation, we compare I1 and I2, then I2 with I3, then I3 with I4. So whatever is the standard formula for standard deviation, we calculate the uh, standard deviation 1 is calculated from I1 and I2. Then standard deviation 2. So then is it still recording? Shamnam is okay, perfect. So I don't know why it went offline. Yeah. So share screen. Okay. Right. So yeah. So SD2 standard deviation 2 is calculated from I2 and I3. So if you want to look into what is standard deviation, you can. Standard deviation is calculated using the mean, using the mean of a sample and with a specific sample itself. So standard deviation is the population standard deviation, size of the population, each value in the population. Xi is the each value in the population. So if you calculate the mean, I1 minus mean square divided by total sample size square root, you'll get a standard deviation 1. So in this way, we calculate standard deviation 1, standard deviation 2, standard deviation 3, and so and so. And then what we do is we plot then in a graph which is called, in the x-axis we have all the standard deviation 1, and in the y-axis we plot all the standard deviations 2. Obviously, because I1, I2, I3, I4 all are in millisecond, the standard deviations are also in milliseconds. So let's say standard deviation 1 was 30 milliseconds. So we will plot all the standard deviation ones. We'll plot all the standard deviations once over here. And then we plot all the standard deviation 2's. So let us assume that these are standard deviation 2's. These are standard deviation 2's. Now, one of the thing is that let's assume that there is no heart rate variability, or heart rate variability is nearly zero. Then under that situation, how you are going to get this plot? You are going to get this plot in a very specific manner. The plot will be something like this, because there is no heart rate variability. So all the points will appear kind of on the same place. Both SD1 and SD2 will appear like a cluster, something like this. And even SD2 will appear almost close to this. This curve is known as the Poincare curve in heart rate variability terminology. So you'll get almost a single cluster. This curve is known as Poincare curve. And in Lyfas, if you go to page number, there is that, right? If you go to this page, Lyfas heart rhythm analysis, this is what your Poincare graph is, right? This is what is your Poincare graph. It's a SD1, it's a SD2. So you're plotting SD1 versus SD2. Now, if this appears clubbed in a place, then there is no, you'll see ectopic peak is zero. They're absolutely clubbed in a space. So that is very low heart rate variability. And then if they are spread all across, that is a high heart rate variability. So generally what we do is we plot a triangle. We plot a triangle to close this marker. This is what is known as IBI triangle or interweight interval triangle, which you can see in the Lyfas over here. So what we do is whichever are the valid signal, we try to club them wherever the distribution is more. We try to place a section over there. We try to place a section over there in order to find out where the distribution is more. So this is known as the IBI triangle. And if you go to HRV page, heart rate variability page, you'll see a IBI histogram. So IBI histogram is nothing but a histogram developed with the IBI. So how many values are between 0 to 200? How many values are between 0 to 200 to 300, 300 to 400, 400 to 500, and so and so. Now, if there is no heart rate variability, that is, if there is a zero heart rate variability, you will see one tall building, no small buildings around it. So one single large tower, no building. If you see that kind of a pattern when there is a single tower, so let me open some of the let me open some of this thing of our, where is the group? Where is our group? So this is the group, right? I mean, we shared some signals over here. Let's say this signal. Let's say this patient over here. We go over here and you see heart rate variability is on the lower side. Heart rate variability is in the lower side because you are getting one, I mean, no smaller buildings, one keep building. And if you take SD1 by SD2, which is around 1.2, so this is more or less normal. Now, if you are having significant anxiety, you will see many smaller and distributed peaks over here, many small buildings and no such large buildings, so equal size building well spread. And you'll see SD1 by SD2 value as significantly large, something like 3.2, 3.5, and more than that. So therefore, whenever the SD1 by SD2 goes above 3.3, we call it an anxiety. We call that an anxiety condition because only in anxiety condition, heart rate variability is that much more. That anxiety can be psychological anxiety, or that anxiety can be a pre-marker of an event. Similarly, if the SD1 by SD2 is very low, there is, let's say it is 0.8, 0.6, something like that, then we have got a very small tower over here. We'll get a single tower, very low heart rate variability. There is no difference between SD1 or SD2, or rather SD1 is one place, SD2 is one place. So under that situation, it's a condition which we call very low heart rate variability, and generally that is a pre-marker of depression. And you would often see that SD1 by SD2 value is very low for diabetic patient, because when you are going through diabetic, the heart rate variability gets reduced, not because you are under depression, but because heart rate variability, because diabetic, long-term diabetic affects the autonomic nervous system. We call that autonomic neuropathy. So one of the causes of diabetic is autonomic neuropathy. Whenever there is an autonomic neuropathy, heart rate variability will decrease. Whenever heart rate variability will decrease, SD1 by SD2 will come down. So if any patient, you see SD1 by SD2 as 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, less than 1, you may be very rest assured that he is either mentally depressed, or he may be probably having a diabetic which causes autonomic neuropathy, or he may be having any other disease like what do you call Deepa ma'am, the disease of autonomic nervous system. What is the exact term? I'm just forgetting. The autoimmune diseases.
Okay, sir. Yeah, autoimmune diseases.
So SD1 by SD2 will come down most probably in the case of autoimmune disease, which will affect the immunity system, will kill body's own immunity, whereby autonomic nervous system's response will come down. Or diabetic is the most common case for autonomic neuropathy, and the third thing is depression. So diabetic will cause depression will cause diabetic. It's correlated because both of them is ultimately causing an autonomic nervous system. So just by looking at this histogram over here and SD1 by SD2, you can figure out two major things: whether somebody is in depression, diabetic, whether somebody is in anxiety. And high anxiety always means probability of hypertension and probability of cardiovascular disease. So anxiety can also be due to event or psychological anxiety, and an event will cause psychological anxiety. Psychological anxiety over a period of time will cause an event. So